All right, good evening, everybody. Take your seat. We are about to start. Welcome to Umain, who's hosting the event. This event tonight, we are, as always, are the GDG Android Stockholm community. Who doesn't know what is that? Raise your hand. Great. No one is new. But anyway, tonight, yes. Tonight we're going to talk about Flutter and Android app modularization. Who's Flutter developer here tonight? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. So this is the new format we are trying to aim for, having some more talks about different platforms, multi-platforms, such as different platforms frameworks, such as KMP or Flutter. So if you want to talk about something in relation to that, if you know anyone willing to talk about that, just reach out to us, organizer. We are here to facilitate this kind of meetups. Tonight here it's me, Daniele, and Tobias. What else? Oh yes, please check out the QR code, join our Slack, keep in touch for all the information, thumbs ups, and like. If you need to post on socials, feel free to use this tags. You're gonna help us to improve your community visibility. We are mostly active on LinkedIn and X, former Twitter. Community guidelines, as always, we are here to have fun and to get to know each other, to discover and learn new things. We do not accept any kind of unrespectful behavior. If you see or hear anything, just please reach out to us immediately. Don't be shy, make new friends. Okay, we are all here to learn. This is to be considered as a playground, in my opinion. Playground for developers, not for kids. Yeah, agenda for tonight, again, Flutter and Android related talk. We can stay here till 8:30. 9 till 9, perfect. Yeah, that's it from us. You're gonna hear more from us later. For now, let's pass the word to you main folks.
This is a sound test. Do everyone hear me loud and clear? Welcome, everyone, to Umain's Android GDG meetup. My name is Dávid Öhman. I'm a mobile developer at Umain Agency, and I am honored to have the opportunity to introduce this gathering by sharing a bit about myself and Umain. About me, you are probably wondering why you are hearing a robotic voice. It's because I am deaf and rely on a text-to-speech tool to vocalize my written words. Feedback on this tool has been mixed. Some find it highly effective, while others are not fond of the voice. To save us some time, no, I can't read your lips. Feel free to communicate with me by texting or any speech-to-text tool. I depend on speech-to-text communication in my daily work, especially during meetings. I've been working professionally for 5 years. When I started, the speech-to-text thing didn't always work as intended. I recommended my coworkers to not watch the transcription or they eventually ended up laughing. Luckily, this technology has seen large improvements in recent years. With the growing popularity of AI, I am optimistic about the rapid advancement of these technologies. At the beginning of my time here at Umain, I was an Android developer, but eventually, I was asked to work on a Flutter project, and now I've worked with Flutter for 4 years. When I don't do programming, I play games. One of my proudest moments would have been shaking hands with Hideo Kojima, the creator of the Metal Gear Solid series and Death Stranding. It actually happened on the street just a block away from where you are sitting right now. Emergency exits. Before proceeding, I want to inform you of the emergency exits. The first exit is located at the front right of the room. There are signs placed to guide you towards other exits behind you. If you need to use the restroom, you can find them located behind you. There are clear and visible signs to guide you to the restroom. About Umain. Umain, the company I am proud to work for, is a digital product design and software engineering consultancy, founded in 2001, that is committed to helping organizations uncover opportunities and realize them at pace. As a subsidiary of ARC, Umain is part of a broader network, with 15 companies falling under the ARC umbrella. What sets us apart is our forward-thinking approach. We proactively embrace and implement the technology of tomorrow, always striving to remain a step ahead in the technological landscape. From my viewpoint, Umain not only focuses on innovation but also places a high priority on the well-being and personal growth of its employees. This emphasis enriches our work culture and, remarkably, enhances our delivery and performance. I've always advocated happy employees because they will work better. Where is Umain located? We are based where you are right now, in Stockholm. Umain let one of my desires go true and I could move to Malmö. And ARC has an office there, so we have some Umain in the southern part of Sweden as well. We also have a presence in London and Chicago. What does Umain do? We help our clients create digital products and services with cross-functional teams. The cross-functional teams work together across these three disciplines. We see that this gives us a real advantage. The strategy team helps us know what and why to build something. The design team tells us how the experience should be along with the look and feel. The development team, which is where I work, is building what we have designed. What can we build? We build mobile apps, both native and cross-platform, and websites. I have some colleagues who build commerce apps where you can buy things. We also create our ecosystems where both hardware and software are included. Innovation is something that we strive for all the time. We investigate and work with emerging technologies. About Hackathon. A hackathon is an event we organize annually called UDATH, which stands for Umain Days of Exploration and Tech Hackathon. This event unfolds over a weekend, where our tech people convene in a location within Sweden to explore unfamiliar technologies and develop small projects. During the most recent hackathon, our team was assigned the topics of image recognition and 3D modeling. Inspired by the TV series Silicon Valley, we decided to replicate the functionality of the seafood app, which can discern whether an item is a hot dog or not. Besides having a blast, my main learning from that weekend was how powerful the 3D program Blender was, alongside the innovative projects devised by other teams. About Evoco. Evoco, owned by the company Byamp, is the project I am working on. It is a system that lets you book and manage desks and rooms in an office. We build an ecosystem here with an app, web, and backend. We cooperate with our sister company named Above, which builds the hardware. The hardware is a device you put on either a desk or on a wall outside of a room. And with it, you can book and manage the room. As you might have already seen, there are devices on the outer walls of our rooms. That's one of the hardware. No more stealing desks or rooms. About McDonald's. Our biggest app is McDonald's. We use KMP, which stands for Kotlin Multiplatform, for the business logic. JetBrains once said to us that it is one of the biggest KMP projects in the world. About Espresso House. We are also responsible for the Espresso House app and web experience. The apps are native iOS and Android. About 7-Eleven. We build the Swedish 7-Eleven iOS and Android apps for their new loyalty programs. They are native apps that use Swift UI and Jetpack Compose. About Scania. We also worked with Scania. We helped them realize their design system by building the components and more. So, you've now been introduced to Umain and what we stand for as a company. Please feel free to approach any of us if you have any questions. About the next speaker, I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, my colleague, Justin Peters. He will delve into what we can achieve using Lottie animations in Flutter. Give him a round of applause.
Hear me all right? Perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Justin Peters, and I am a mobile developer that's been working with Umain for a couple of years. And I have worked with Flutter and recently have adopted Kotlin into my professional experiences. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I just need to get it closer. Okay, cool. But yeah, I'll basically just go over what Flutter is, what Lottie animations are, and like a more advanced specific use case that I used Lottie animations with. So let's just get that out of the way. There we go. Cool. Oh, yeah, neat. If I didn't want to do that, but I'm just going to go over what we're going to be talking about real quick. So I'm going to talk about what is Flutter and what is Lottie exactly for anyone that doesn't have to be familiar with those. And then how do we use Lottie animations in Flutter? And also, how did I use Lottie animations for a particular client? And what were like the solutions that I implemented to fit their needs? So, and then I go into a code demo. So let's just get right into it. So, hands in the audience, who has worked with or is familiar with Flutter? Okay, so a good amount of folks. But for those that don't know, Flutter is a cross-platform tool that you can use for building apps on iOS and Android with one code base. And it also has the capability of building Windows, Mac, web applications as well. But it's primarily used for mobile platforms. And now, how about Lottie animations? Have you guys worked with Lottie animations before? Okay, cool. Well, basically what Lottie animations are this animation data that's like stored in a string format with a JSON text. And basically with that, you're able to have a lot more efficient animation than you would with like a GIF, for example. So it takes up less space, the animations look better, and they use vector graphics, so you can scale it up or down based on the screen size and it won't have any issues. And this tool was developed by Airbnb internally for their products, but then they ended up expanding it a bit more industry wide. And now it's used in various other development kits, such as using it with Flutter. So let's just get right into how do we use Lottie files in Flutter? Well, the first thing you'll want to do is you'll want to set up, get a package set up in your project, which is the Lottie package. And basically what packages are in Android terms, it's like a dependency. So you set up this package within your project and then you get access to all of its functionality right out of the gate. And setting up animations with Lottie is like super simple. So all you have to do is you set up assets folder with all of your animations that you want to store. And then Lottie.asset is basically just a composable or like a widget in Flutter terms, that you use to present the animations. And if you want to just have an animation that loops on its own and just plays, which is probably going to be like 90% of the circumstances that you're going to use this with, you'll just use it like this, and this is what the result looks like. So in this case, we have 3 different animations that are playing in a column, essentially. So you can have all these animations play at the same time and it won't have any performance issues. So that's really nice. But let's just get a little bit beyond the basic implementation of it and get into a bit more of an advanced use case. So how did I end up using Lottie? Well, the first project I was tasked with using Lottie was basically a progress bar to track rewards progress for users within our application for XXL. And basically the task was, okay, we can either set this up programmatically, which would take way too long, or we can use Lottie animations to help us out and save a lot of time. So that's what we ended up doing. And basically the task is, okay, how do we set up an animation that could have a variable number of reward steps? Because if it was always the same amount of reward steps, we would just use one animation for it and change the progress that you go through that single animation. But in this case, you can't really do that. So we ended up using little segments like this to build the animation. I'll get into more about how that works in the next slide with how to set up an animation sequence. So basically, what we're doing here is setting the animation to play one after the other to create the illusion that we are having a single animation play out. So it'll play out like this. It'll just go along the bar, going through the steps, and then it'll stop once he reaches the end state of the animation. And basically we use a function called when complete, which will determine like, okay, so at this point, when this animation finishes, then we start playing the next animation in the sequence and it's seamless. But what if our like progress bar is a bit long? Like let's say we have like 10, 20, 100 steps. How do we like make sure that the user sees all those like animations play out? Well, this is where auto scroll comes into play. Auto scroll will let the animation continue on outside the screen by just shifting everything over and then basically continuing on with the animation until it reaches the end. And then he's a happy little camper fishing. So basically how this works is that every like 5 segments in your reward steps that you go along, it will automatically scroll over to the side as far as it can to the next sequence. And basically it's based on the number of reward steps that you've already completed. So based on the number of steps you completed, it animates to that position with the scroll view. And then there's a lot of finer details that come into play with setting up something like this. So we had issues with how we wanted to handle like making the animations blend together effectively. Because one issue was, okay, well, we have like this little guy that's running across the screen and we wanted to make it look like it's just one guy going across the whole bar instead of just like a bunch of little guys that are like passing the baton to someone else along the way. But that is effectively what is happening behind the scenes in a way, because essentially we're having our little men phase in and out of existence based on what point of the animation you're at. So when the animation, before the animation starts, he's invisible. And then when the animation starts playing, comes into existence. And then when the animation stops, then he pops out of existence again. And I'll go into more detail about how that exactly works. But for now, this is what it would look like if I didn't make the man invisible. It would just go along like that, and you'd see like the starting position and the end position of all the points where he ends up at. So that wouldn't have been good for this solution. So let's just go right into the demo. And if you have any questions about the code afterwards, just let me know. So let's just dive right in. So first of all, we have our little widget here, or like composable, where we can set the number of steps and completed steps. And that basically just is like representative, like a value that you would get back from an API call that would like determine like how many steps you've progressed through the rewards program, or how many total steps there are. And then let's go into the code itself. So let's go up to the top, and then we have our parameters being passed in, and then we have our animation controllers being instantiated as a list. So for every reward step, we generate a new animation controller that can control the other animation controllers, basically. And then we have it dispose of all the animation controllers so we don't have any memory leak issues after the widget is like disappeared. But start animation is the core of the animation, essentially. So basically, when you play start animation, you send in the index of the animation that you're playing. And then basically, if it can play the animation, then it'll go through animation controllers and then the animation index, and then it'll play that animation. And then when that animation completes, then it starts the next animation +1. So just keep doing that over and over and over until it's reached the end of the sequence, basically. And then here's our section for how the scroll controller works. So basically, we have our scroll controller animate to the position that we want to scroll to based off of what the current animation index is. And basically, this animation just takes 1 second to complete, but we basically just have it happen every 5 steps along the way. It'll just keep going and going and going and going if you need it to. And then this is another important part of it. So do you notice how with this, that there's like different animations? Like you'll have like this guy resting at the end here, but then all the other animations are just him running across each step. This is where that is determined. So basically, we take in the index of the animation, compare it to the total number of reward steps, and then basically check.json is basically this animation right here where he goes from point to point, and then finish.json is basically where he reaches the end here. This is basically representative of like you reaching the end of all your rewards progress, and you get a little star for doing a good job. And then there's like halfway points where if you like are going towards the end of the rewards progress but are in between steps, then it'll just show them like fishing in the middle here, and I'll show you that in a little demo here. But here's where the visual aspects of our widget take place. So we have it in a scroll controller, and we have the scroll controller not be interactable by the user, so it'll just automatically animate on its own without any user input. And then we set up the children of this stack. The reason we're using a stack instead of a row is that the stack lets us overlap the elements just a little bit so that we have this seamless look right here, because otherwise there would be a bit of a gap in between each section, and we wouldn't want that. So the stack allows us to have a bit more of a customization to how we want to set up our rows and columns and whatnot. And then we have all of our widgets being instantiated with reward step Lottie. So we send in the animation controller for that particular animation. We send in the animation path to show which animation that we want to present. And then we set up a callback, which will let us have the first animation in the sequence call back to start animation and begin the chain reaction over and over and over until it's complete. So let's just go down here, and then is first will determine if it is the first animation in the sequence. Let's just go down, and here we go. So A note on this. This is what's determining if the man is invisible or visible along the animation. So what is happening here is that we have a add status listener set up for our animations. So we have the controller listening for different events that happen along the way with your animation. So for example, when the animation is continuing, we show the person running along the path. If the animation's completed, then we hide them. And this is how it exactly works. So this is our Lottie.asset where we're loading in our Lottie file. And then we set up the animation controller to connect to it. And then we have a thing called a Lottie delegate, which allows us to go into the Lottie animation itself and change values whenever we want. So in this case, we're using value delegate.opacity to change if the guy is visible or not. So basically we're searching for the value, which is man outlines within the animation. And then basically with our Boolean, we're setting to see, okay, is he visible or not? And then it'll determine like how the sequence plays out. But I'll just quickly show you what happens when this is no longer in the code. So let's just restart this real quick. Yeah, so you'll see it breaks the whole illusion of it being a single animation when it's set up like this. But when it goes in and out of like being visible, then it kind of creates that idea that it's just a single animation. But in reality, it's just made of a bunch of smaller animations along the way. So let's just bring that back in. There we go. And then we have our onloaded. And then basically when the animations first load, we have the isFirst value determining if the first animation in the sequence should start the chain reaction. So the first animation will need to determine on its own if it should play, whereas all the other ones are listening for the one prior to determine, okay, I should play or not. Okay, I should play. Okay, I should play. And then it keeps going until all of the animations are completed based off of the values we send in. And I'll quickly show you what that looks like if we have completed steps. The 3 instead. So let's just reload that. And then, yep, it'll just go 1, 2, and 3 steps. And then it'll just be in between steps. So that is my code. You can check it out on my repo that's publicly available. There's more comments on the code that you can check out that explains a bit more about what the code is doing. And also, there's additional comments left by the Flutter developers if you're wanting to learn more about how to set up Flutter projects, since I based this off of like a standard Flutter template. There's more resources in that repo that you can use to learn more about Flutter development. So, are there any questions? Oh, yes. Yes. Oh, yeah. So you're basically asking what was exactly the flickering issue that I was talking about? So basically, the flickering was caused by me trying to experiment a bit with deleting like the last frame of the person animation. And that basically like it fixed the problem of like him like sticking around on the last frame, but that caused the flicker because it was one single frame of like him not existing that created that flickering effect. And that's kind of like was the original issue I faced. But then when I set it to be invisible instead, it kept the pace consistent and it kept that illusion of it being a single animation. Hopefully that makes sense. Good. Anyone else? Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Do you believe that this was significantly faster to do it like this compared to coding it entirely?
Yes. Basically, what I would have to do from coding it from scratch is I would have to code all of the UI elements to be perfectly aligned. So I would also have to have the man perfectly lined up with the progress bar, and then I'd also have to have the check mark show up at the right time, and I'd also have to have like the circle fill up at the right time. There'd be a lot of shapes that I would have to account for, that I would have to program into this, compared to just collaborating with a designer that would allow me to produce something a bit quicker in this fashion. Any other questions? Yes. Usually you use After Effects. That's what a lot of designers use, but there's also like Lottie animation websites like lottiefiles.com, where you can actually download a bunch of Lottie animations for free from there if you want to just have some animations to play with. And that's actually, a lot of the animations in my presentation are from that. So this is one that's from that website, and I converted it to a GIF. And then if we go back here, this is also a Lottie animation. And then the one prior is a Lottie animation, and this is also an animation. So you can do a lot of creative things with Lottie animations. There's a lot of flexibility with it. Yes.
So usually who's designing this kind of animations? You developer or the designer?
Usually the designer. Basically, we talked with someone from a different agency within Umain or within ARC, and we collaborated with them, or I directly collaborated with him to get the end result you see today, where he basically created 3 separate animations in After Effects. And then he used After Effects to export it to Lottie for me to use in my own project. And there were some particular settings he had to set up for it to look right in Flutter, because initially when he exported it, it looked really funny. It looked like super distorted. So I had to set up certain settings for exporting it. Anyone else?
Would it be possible to actually merge programmatically Lottie's animation into one animation, so you have better control over the, how it flows? Because what's sketchy for me is the idea of creating those many blocks of animations and then kind of like imagine the use case changes a little bit and you need to, I don't know, rewind animation from some point. That would be extremely hard with your approach.
Right.
So the question is, like, is it possible to merge 2 Lottie animations into one before you play it?
I'm not sure how that would exactly work, because
you,
usually,
like you said, that is JSON. So basically you can combine the JSON together, right?
I guess you can generate a new file of JSON based on what you have set up before.
Yeah, it's something like this, but just to have better control over, like, the moment when we are at this animation, or you didn't consider that?
I didn't consider it. I just set it up for this particular use case.
Okay.
But if I had more time with it, and if there was additional use cases, I imagine that you could do something with that, where you just like generate a JSON file that would also act as like a dynamic animation that starts up. But I imagine it would take a bit of time to work with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not entirely sure how that would work in practice.
Thanks.
It's not possible.
It's not?
Yeah. It's not.
Okay. Okay.
Just so you know.
All right. Good to know. Any other questions?
How's the file dimension for this animation? The JSON file dimension.
File dimension?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're very small. Like, I think most of them are like less than a megabyte. Usually they're like half a kilobyte in size, so they're pretty efficient. Yeah. Yes, Gaz.
Is Lottie like
a universally accepted way of doing this? Or are there competitors in this space? Is Lottie a private company? How does this work?
Lottie is basically like a framework that Airbnb created, basically to fulfill their own animation needs, and then basically they like broadened the scope to have other platforms be able to use it. So Lottie is more of like a format than a particular company, even though they have like a company backing it essentially. And then there are other animation tools out there that you can use. It's just Lottie is probably the most widely used of these types of formats.
Is it open source?
Yeah. All right. Any other questions?
I know we discussed this in previous days, but do you have a Lottie file that you can show? Because then people might
Yes.
understand why it's not really mergeable.
Yeah, true.
Because it's not that clean.
No, it's not. So if I were to go into my hierarchy here, this is what it looks like. It's just a bunch of like segments that will like determine like how like segments are drawn and how the segments move.
And with coordinates.
Yeah, with coordinates. So, I mean, yeah, it would be pretty hard to set up something like merging them together, if not impossible. Like, it would take ages, honestly, if someone could figure out how to do it. But yeah, that's what it looks like without the nice little man sitting here. Yes.
And this animation has a transparent background because the designer created it with a transparent background, right?
Yeah.
So the idea, what if we put more animations into a stack and then we play with callbacks? So you're not merging into the JSON, but you're actually play with different animations at the same time based on, callbacks or timing or whatever.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what we're already doing with the when complete function. We're just playing the animations as the first animation completes, and then it'll go on and on and on. And you could set up like animation controllers that would sync up multiple animations at the same time based off the index. So you could set up something like that.
But no, just asking.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you could just set it up like that.
If you have a lot of Lottie animation in your application,
Yeah.
and does it affect application performance?
I haven't had any issues with performance, and you can do some pretty crazy things with Lottie animations, and it will still perform fine. You'll just have to play around with it if you really want to stress like the limits, because basically this is just like animation, 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 animation. But some people could play a lot of stuff at once and it'll still work fine. So you'll just have to play around with it and see, but it's very performant.
How big is the size of the
File?
dependency?
Oh, the dependency. Let's see. I don't imagine it's big. But basically all you have to do is go into pub spec and then add it in like this. And then when you go to the package, let's see if it has it on its repo. Let's see. And it's also regularly maintained, like very frequently. Does it have the size on GitHub? What was that? Oh yeah, releases. Yeah, good idea. I guess I'll just download it. Yeah, a zip. Yeah, 21 megs or megabyte or yeah.
Also the whole like repository conversion. The actual archive itself is
Yeah, yeah. But either way, pretty small, pretty efficient. Any other questions?
The vector files, could those be outside the JSON file, or must they be included in the JSON file? Can you
Yeah,
have them on a network drive, for instance, and
well,
in the cloud?
you can do you mean like can you access like animations remotely?
Exactly.
Yeah, you can do like Lottie.network, and I'll show the example in the presentation here real quick. So see this, you can do Lottie.network, and then you can access the URL that way.
But is the files inside the JSON file, or can you have them explicitly outside?
I think you have to have them inside.
Inside, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else?
Well, let's take 10 minutes break.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I hope you are as excited as I am, because for me, this is a new perspective. I was sitting there. But let's kick it out. I came here today to talk about modularization. I think most of us heard about it, did it. I was trying to gather my information and shove it to you. So the agenda for today, a little bit introduction, some side notes that you should know, that you should be aware of when you are watching this presentation. I will talk about why is it good, how to do it, best practices, and of course some drawings. So my name is David. I'm from Hungary. I have that amount of experience. This is my LinkedIn. If you want to reach out, I'm working at Marshall. Marshall is the company who makes speakers, amplifiers, headphones. Maybe you heard about it or not. So, important notes. This is not a guide. This is my personal experience, personal preference. Do whatever you want with it. Sleep while I'm presenting or just pay attention. Up to you. I'm trying to give food for thoughts to people who is not into modularization, to, oh, you can do this. And maybe for people that, yeah, I know many ways, but oh, this was a new. The Gradle I will showing you is in Groovy, not in Kotlin, because I had some issues with the Kotlin version and I didn't have time to fix that, so Groovy. So, why is modularization is good? Well, I think we can agree on that even the word holds its solution that makes the code more separated. Because I can bet everyone who developed an application, created a new project, started something like this. And yeah, this is good, works, but I prefer this. When you can separate layers in the application, responsibilities, you can create a hierarchy between your models, between your features. Which the modularization is very good enforcing layers and hierarchy. Because if you don't let one module to know about the other one, they won't know about each other. In the first picture where there is one module, the application, everyone knows about everyone, except the private functions. There is a very strict visibility control. As I mentioned, you cannot see into modules, but you can use function inside modules even when you're using the internal modifier. So it will be private to the given module, but inside the module you can use it, outside of the module you cannot. It's very maintainable because if you are doing it good, then it means that one module is responsible for one thing or one layer. For example, if there is a feature, that feature module will be responsible for that feature and won't affect any others. Obviously, there are dependencies inside of the application when modules depending on other modules, and it can affect each other. But I will show you later how to avoid that, or how to say that, make best defenses for later on. Reusable. You can reuse your modules inside the application many times in other applications. Very common use case for me personally, when I'm creating a module, I'm publishing into Maven packages and I'm using it in other applications. Because once I developed it well and great, I don't want to Control-C, Control-V, it's on the cloud, use it. Development speed. It's very important because you can focus on one thing, your colleague can focus on one thing, the other thing, and you won't affect each other probably. You can work parallel without modifying common code or each other code. It will decrease the possibility of merge conflicts, for example. Compile speed is very important because if you are just developing one module and you only modify one module, why would you compile every other? It's Gradle settings, for example, where you can set caching, and it can reduce the compile speed like 90%. For me, the first initial compile in an application usually like 2 minutes, but if I turn on the cache, it's like 6 seconds. So it's very important. And of course, it holds many, many other things that I don't want to talk about because that's not the presentation. But if you just think about the dynamic dynamic modules or instant dynamic modules, where you can enforce in the application that there is a feature that if the user not clicking on it, then it won't be downloaded. So it reduces the application size. It reduces the use flows that you have to initially put into the application. So there is a lot of other things that can be used. For example, as I mentioned, you can publish modules to Maven repositories and reuse it any other way. And how to do it? Well, I won't tell you exactly which button, how to press it, what to type. This will give you just a brief introduction on a very basic level. Good thing, the app is already a module. This is the module where your application is running. And later on, I will show you why is it important or how is it connecting everything each other. When you are developing, you will start, like as a previous picture, one module. And sometimes you need to consider that, okay, this application requires modularization or it will be a small application. It doesn't matter because when you are developing, always keep in mind the modularization. Because if you keep in mind in the future, okay, let's create a module, you just need to copy your code, put it into a module, and then it's done, it's modularized, and you don't have to worry about later on anything. Make plans if you have time. It's very important, and if you don't have, do it, because it's the base principle of creating modules, because then you know what you want to put inside of a module and how to want to use it. There are many module types. I bet some of you know everything, some of you don't know the television or Wear OS, that's fine. The most two common is the Android library and the Kotlin, Java or Kotlin library. These two is distinct between that the Android library contains, as the library says, Android-related specifications, configurations like flavors, build configs, sign-ins, many other things. The Java or the Kotlin contains, as the name says, Java-related configurations. The settings.gradle contains what modules we have in the application. This will be the main source of the truth of that, I have this module, and there you can look out how to refer to them in your different modules. And this is an example how to use it when you are just saying, this is the project that I want to use. And also quick mention that in the settings Gradle, for example, I won't talk about it, but it's nice to mention that there is the included build where you can use compiled module in other modules and you don't have to recompile at all. I think since a year, Android Studio is really pushing that, yes, use version catalog. It's a very nice thing. It's a very good thing. I think it's around for 2 or 3 years, but it's very recommended to use it because this will be your single source of truth for your dependencies, your plugins. You can create bundles of dependencies that you are usually using together. Before that, there was the build source. Build source, it's a preoccupied name by the Android Studio. If you want to create your own build source, you need to create the build source the way it's shown, and you need to create a Gradle containing this, and then synchronize the project, and it will generate automatically. The build source is a single source of truth that you can apply on any module that you are using. You can define dependencies, you can define plugins, you can define configurations, version code, and many other things. It's a good thing, but it's a dangerous thing. Because if you are defining dependencies inside the build source and you are referring this dependency on any other module, if you update a version or just changed anything in the build source, it will recompile every module that you have. One of my favorite practice in Groovy that you are using common Gradle files, which means that you are creating configurations for, as I mentioned before, Java libraries and Android libraries, which is look like this. In the code, it's literally just the same configuration that you have by default in the application module. And then you can apply it to use the configuration. So later on in another module, you don't have to define anything else, just the specific dependencies or specific configurations that it will apply to that specific module. So you can reuse your configuration in every other module that you have. There's a possibility to create modules inside of modules. There are many use cases. What I will show you is like creating a directory where you can create a directory where you can put modules, and it will, for example, in the beginning, it can be a features, and it will contain the features module you have. It's very easy to create. You just literally create a package, and then in the settings Gradle, as you've seen before, you just include it. Yes, this is a module. It won't do anything because there is nothing inside it but just other modules. Very important that the visibility modifier, which is in, for example, library alpha, library alpha, which only be visible in that module. So the internal is sort of say in Java the package private package, or I don't know how is it called. In modules, later on I will show you the structure, how should it look like, and I would really recommend to use value classes. Value classes is good for the compiler. It's good for enforcing contracts between modules, interfaces, implementations, and you can be sure when you are using a device ID, for example, which is a string format, you only accept a device ID, not like a MAC address or anything else. You can build up the build process with Gradle properties, which, as I mentioned before, that you can turn on caching, you can turn on parallels, so they won't compile after other. It will do it as fast as possible. I personally like the approach when you are creating a resources module, which contains all your resources. And under resources, I mean the strings, the drawables, the navigation routes, the deep links, everything, because there will be one single source of truth which will contain all the resources that your application has, and then you can easily modify one and it will affect everywhere it's used. I won't talk about the navigation today, but for example, it's a very good practice to use your destination links and deep links here to make it accessible to every other module without letting the modules know about each other. And draw. It's very helpful to draw your hierarchy. How does it look like? What modules you have? Which module you see? Which module is affected? Which module is reaching out the other? Because it can show a lot of flow that, oh no, my data layer is accessing the UI or vice versa. And if you are draw down your hierarchy, it will help you. It helped me many times that, oh yeah, I was stupid there. I need to remove that. So I would recommend to draw. So now there comes a little bit of drawing. On the up, you can see what will a little bit of legend. Green is interface, blue implementation, and the dotted border is the internal. It's very, very personal, this hierarchy, what I like. I used it many projects, and for my experience, it was always good. But as I told some of you, I know that some of you like to use one more layer or two more layer, use cases or many other layers. But for me, the bottom layer is the data. The data is where you reading from a database, communicating to a server, reading locations, communicating with a device, or just any data that you want to store or pass higher. That would be a repository layer which collects all the data, handles all the business logic. Okay, I got this data, but how do I want to present it? How do I want to pass it up? How do I want to deal with this data? It's based on the repository because the data only knows, okay, you want to save this thing? I saved it. You want to receive this thing? There you go. But what you want to do, I don't care because it's responsibility of the repository. And of course, the higher level is the UI. The UI, under the UI, I mean the UI and the view model. The UI is only responsible to, yeah, I get the data. This is how it looks like. I press the button, tell the repository that, hey, the user pressed this button, do whatever you want with it. It can be a login, it can be a register. But then the repository will tell, okay, press the button. I need this information to do with it. A module structure should, I think, look like this. There would be an interface and the model. The model contains the information that, yeah, I press the login and I want to log in with the user. The interface has a function login, which only accepts a user login model. So the interface will provide the option that you want to log in, give me this model. You have login, this is your model. It will be the first stand of the line of defense in a module. And of course, the implementation, it will be totally internal. It shouldn't be visible to other modules because this is just to this module. It is true for data, repository, UI, or anything. The mapper is literally used for mapping, for example, data into a repository model and then pushing it to the UI. The mapper is the thing that I mentioned that it's very useful if you want to create a great defense between modules. Because, for example, if the data coming from 3 strings and you only need 2 or you converting into an int, and for example, backend crashes. My biggest pain point that I never trust the backend. If it's required, then it's not required. It can be optional. It can be null. And with the mapper, I can avoid that. Okay, it came as a null, then I won't crash the application because then I just draw, okay, it was null, it was an error. But if the proper data comes, then the mapper will say, okay, here's your data. And if, for example, the backend changes, like, okay, that I won't send you anymore this data, then I can just fix it in the mapper. And I'm defended because the mapper knows how to map this information to another one. And another important thing is the DI. I prefer if the module knows how to provide its interfaces, what information it needs to create an implementation, what services, what room DB, what anything. Because with this DI, then, for example, if you are following that approach that you create a module, provide healed, publish a module to the Maven package, you can use your dependency in your application, and the healed knows how to provide it. You don't have to define anything. As I mentioned before, or before, the data module. For example, the data module can hold a local data source, remote data source, can hold its models, contracts, implementation mapper, and a DI. This will be the lowest layer. This is the most lowest layer that can provide data to the repository, to the UI, what to present, what to show. And then, as I mentioned, the repository module, which contains multiple repositories, hold the business logic of your application. What happens if the user presses the login button? Then, okay, this is what I need. For example, if I want to press the login button, okay, is the user has saved login already? So should I get the information from there? If the token has expired, or do I need to do any changes? If, for example, it has no save login, but I know that I need to use the remote data source to log in to get this information. After that, as soon as I get the information, I can save it to the local data source based on my logic. And the nicest thing about it that if I want to use the local data source as a room, I will provide the room implementation. If I want to use a data store, I use the data store implementation or anything I want. Because, for example, in healed, you can decide what you want to use or what you want to provide. And obviously, upper layer is the UI module, feature module, like a login or a register or a home screen, profile, anything. It will use the same syntax or same approach as the repository when we use the data layer, that it will fetch that, okay, I have a login, I want to log in, I will use the login repository. But I know that, okay, on the login screen, I need to also check that there are some endpoints or information that I can use from another repository, then I will use that. With this, I can create dependencies or modules that if I remove the feature of one module, the repository module won't be affected. If I want to change the repository module first repo implementation, I can do it with these, because the interface is there for me with the model to protect me. That it will define how should the implementation look like with features, with functions, and I need to create an implementation to supply that. This is a very raw example of the highest level. That, as we know, we have the app module, which I mentioned early, and it will literally create your application, which means that you have your feature modules which holds its UI, view model, and its own navigation. You won't call the other module from other module because it will break the abstraction or the layers or the hierarchy, and you don't want to do that. So you store your information in the app module. So the app module knows how to connect your navigation. Okay, after login finished, then the app module knows that, okay, after that I want to go to the home, or after that I want to go to the forget password, anything. This is one way to do it, but also, if you want, you can create a core module which will contain utilities, other functionalities, UI components. For example, if you create a design system, you can put it into the core module, or you can create a design module where you only contains text, shapes, text fields, everything. And then, for example, the core module has not a permission, but it can be used by every other module, because what the core module contains, as it's in the name, core functionalities. Or you can create a navigation module where you contain all the features, and then you can, for example, create different navigations without changing anything, just providing a different module for your application. So it's a little bit wrap up that keep in mind that always make plans. Drawing can help a lot to find out bugs, find out, yeah, this layer is broken, this layer is not respected. Always keep in mind modularization, even from the very beginning, that, yeah, creating a to-do list of, should I make it in that way? Yeah, you should, because it will help you in the future if you want to expand it. Always respect the layers and the responsibilities. Never break abstraction. Because if you do, then what's the point? You have other modules which depending on each other, and then later on, if you want to change something, your Lego bricks are already corrupted. It always worth the time to modularize and think of it. Even if you don't do it, just think of it, because it will give you the thinking of later on that, yeah, I created this function, I should put it into a module so I can use it everywhere else. And be curious. There's a lot of things about modularization that can be found: instant delivery, dynamic features, how to use. If I remember well, it was like a month or 2 months ago, last year, when Umain presented KMP. And for example, the KMP is using modules, exactly these modules for Android and different modules for iOS. So thank you very much for your attention. Questions?
Someone has a question.
Great presentation. Okay. I had a question about, you showed each module has like implementation and interface, right, part. Is it like sub-modules where you import only like the interface part, like API part in other modules, or all of them are in the same module?
All of them in the same module. There's a possibility, if you want, maybe I forgot to mention that there are many ways to do this. You can do it less, you can do it more, you can do it complex, you can do it easy. There is a possibility to create a module which contains only the interface, and it's possibility to create a module which only contains the implementation. You can do that. No one will say no. But later on, you will realize that, okay, but this making my code much bigger, because all of these modules has their own Gradle file. So it will simply populate your repository and the structure. So all of these, for example, the repository module contains the repositories. Of course, it can be break down into user-related repositories or device-related. It's up to you, because it's what is confident for you, what the project requires. It's up to you. But in this example, the repository has the implementation next to it.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. It was really nice to see. I wanted to hear about your kind of like personal journey, maybe in Marshall. Did you start with like a legacy repository and you're kind of like slowly modularizing, or it was like from scratch and you have to, yeah. How was it for you?
Vietnam flashback story. You know, there's a point when trying is not enough. You have to shoot yourself in the leg and start again from scratch. When I joined Marshall, it was a legacy repository. Oh my God, it was very legacy. It had even data binding, view binding, Java classes, Kotlin classes, Compose. I don't want to talk about it. It was legacy. I tried my best for 3-4 months that, okay, let's make it something too perfect that make it happen. It doesn't happen. I failed. And then I suggested that, okay, what if we start over? We know where are the flows, we know how to work it, we know it's a very simple application, put it into modules. And unfortunately, the main purpose of the application is so corrupted, it's literally no hierarchy, there is no architecture, there is no MVI, MVVM, there is nothing. So even the data layer knows about the UI and affecting each other. And so the main purpose of the application couldn't put into a module. But there were some pain points where, for example, a whole tab can be extracted into a module. And it has its own module, and it's, let's say, it works. No one wants to touch it. It works. When we will have time, we will redo it properly. But sometimes you reach a point where you cannot do about modularization because the code is so contaminated
Yeah.
that you can try your best, easier to start over.
All right.
So you started.
Yeah, I started over. And since then I'm smiling.
Can you compare the build times with the previous app versus the new app, given that they have the same features?
The previous app, just when I checked out without nothing, it was like 17 minutes. Sync. And I'm using MCAT, M2. So it was 17 minutes. And oh my God, it was terrible. But the new app is 3 minutes or 2 minutes, the very basic, because of the caching, the parallel and everything. And if I just change in one module, it can be like 10 seconds.
Cool.
You have a way of, because you mentioned drawing, do you have a way of automatically generating a graph where you can see which modules depend on which?
If you know one, please let me know. I was looking for it, searching for it. I was almost get to the point that is nothing, then maybe I will try to do it. No, I don't know anything. Sorry.
There are plugins at Android Studio. There are plugins at Android Studio that can generate some kind of graph. It's not very easy to read because it's one humongous horizontal image, but it's something that you can use as a base in order to get a grasp of how things look.
Okay, cool. Luckily, the application, what I'm working is very easy to separate, and I'm not going, this module knows this module knows this, feature modules knows about this? No. Okay, then cool. So for me, the drawing is literally just sitting down. Okay, my robot, this is the app, knows these features. This is the layer. This is the data layer. This is the repo layer. Does it know about this? No. Cool. So for me, it's very, very manual, but I love it because every time I go back, I see that, okay, this is where I started, this is where I'm heading, and this is where I messed up. I don't know. Any more questions? There's one more there.
There's a guy over there.
Try to throw this thing. I want to ask one moment you mentioned about like do you use Groovy and not Kotlin? Can you tell why? What issue you faced?
Yes. Okay. Let me go back there. It was yes. In Groovy, when I'm using the apply from like this way, I haven't found out if it's just my configuration or not. But in Groovy, it will generate the Android specific configurations, the build flavors and everything. And when I'm using it in Kotlin, it won't let me, it will let me apply this way. But if I have a specific thing that I want to change in this grader where I applied it, it won't show, for example, the Android part of the grader because it's not auto-generated. And with this, I cannot change that. Yeah, this will use this namespace, this will use these flavors, because I have to apply Android, like the normal Android application, Android library, to be able to generate those. I haven't found out the reason why is it working like this. Maybe I'm just used the wrong configuration. But if I'm just switching to Kotlin, it dies. And I found out the reason, but I couldn't know what's the solution for that.
Thanks. It's a good point to investigate more.
Definitely.
It might be because you need to apply Kotlin at the Gradle root file. I'm not sure, but it might be. Anyway, just wanted to say that everything you just mentioned here is applicable in the same way using version catalog and plugin. How's the new word, the new naming for the plugin, conventional plugin?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, so everything is applicable in the same way. So my suggestion maybe for your project is to switch to that.
Okay, maybe that was my problem, but I will check out. Thank you.
Any other question?
Yeah, so a quick question. So from a user's perspective, does modularization affect the performance of the app? So is it smoother, better load time, and is it more responsive? So at the end of the day, does it have an impact for the users?
In a way, yes, and in a way, no. It's not affecting the performance at all. It's only give us, for designer user perspective, as I mentioned before, the dynamic modules, the dynamic features, which can be downloaded on demand. So if, for example, as far as I know, it's mostly used in games, that when you are reaching the new level, you can download it on the next part. So you don't have to download everything at once, only if you reach a certain level that, yeah, you can download the new one. So you won't be populated with a big size of files or the APKs. Any other question? If not, then thank you very much for your attention.